The desert planet was cold that night, even though 2 suns had burned the sand all day. The wind carried dust and broken metal pieces from old wars. Far away, a lonely human named Eli Carter walked through the wreckage with a flashlight and a small scanner on his wrist. He was a scavenger. He searched for anything useful left from crashed ships. Eli's boots made soft crunching sounds on the sand. Every few minutes his scanner beeped when it found power cells or wires. He worked alone because people here didn't trust each other. Some would kill for a handful of fuel. He had learned that lesson early when his own crew betrayed him and left him to die. Tonight the silence felt heavier than usual. The sky above was full of red lightning from the storm far away. Suddenly his scanner flashed red. It was showing life signs. Eli froze. That was impossible. Nobody lived here. Not humans, not aliens. The radiation from the wrecks was deadly. He turned off the scanner's light and listened carefully. There it was, a weak sound like a whimper. He followed the sound through twisted metal and burned hull plates. Smoke and sand mixed in the air, making it hard to breathe. Then he saw a small hand reaching out from under a broken wing. The fingers were thin, trembling, covered in dust. Eli dropped his bag and ran forward. He pulled away the heavy metal with all his strength. Underneath, he found a small figure curled up, half buried in sand. She looked no older than 10 or 11. Her skin was pale, almost glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her hair was silver white, tangled and full of ash. She wore no clothes, only a few torn strips of cloth barely covering her. For a second, Eli thought she was dead. Then her lips moved. A weak voice whispered, "Please, don't sell me." He felt his stomach twist. What kind of place had she come from? Who would sell a child like her? He took off his own jacket and wrapped it around her carefully. Her body was shaking from the cold. When he touched her arm, he felt strange symbols glowing faintly under her skin. Small blue lights forming lines like ancient writing. "Hey, easy," Eli said softly, trying not to scare her. "You're safe now, kid." Her eyelids fluttered and she looked at him. Her eyes were not normal. They were silver, reflecting light like water. She looked at his face as if trying to remember something. "Eli," she whispered, her voice trembling. He froze. "How do you know my name?" But she didn't answer. Her eyes closed again and her breathing slowed. Eli lifted her gently in his arms. She was light as a feather. He carried her out of the wreckage and looked around the endless desert. There was nothing but shadows and the sound of the wind. He had a hover bike hidden behind a dune nearby. As he walked toward it, his scanner beeped again, this time louder. Multiple red dots appeared on the display. Something else was out there. Eli looked back at the wreckage. He could see faint lights moving through the storm, like search drones scanning the ground. Whoever was searching was close. Maybe they were looking for her. Maybe they had left her here to die. He started running, holding her close. The sandstorm hit hard, but he didn't stop. When he reached the hover bike, he placed her gently on the back seat and covered her with his blanket. Then he jumped on, started the engine, and sped away into the dark desert. As they raced through the storm, the girl began to shiver. Her hands glowed brighter now, like tiny blue fires under her skin. The lights pulsed with her heartbeat. The scanner on Eli's wrist went wild. Unreadable signals, power levels beyond anything he had seen. "What are you?" he whispered under his breath. He tried to slow down when lightning struck nearby. The bike almost tipped over. He looked back, and for a second he saw shapes in the storm. Tall, metallic figures walking through the sand with red eyes glowing. They were not human. They were hunters. Eli pushed the bike faster. The engine screamed. He didn't know who these things were, but he knew one thing. They wanted the girl. After an hour, he finally reached the rocky hills at the edge of the wasteland. Hidden between 2 cliffs was a small door, almost invisible under sand. Eli parked the bike, carried the girl inside, and sealed the door behind him. The inside was dark and quiet. It was his secret home, a small cabin built from old ship parts. He laid the girl on his bed and turned on a small heater. She looked peaceful now, like she was only sleeping. Eli stared at her glowing markings. He didn't understand what they meant, but they seemed alive. He sat beside her, rubbing his tired eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. His scanner blinked one last time before turning off. Unregistered signal detected. Unknown energy signature nearby. Eli looked up at the door, his heart pounding. Something or someone had followed them through the storm. He didn't know it yet, but tonight would change everything. The girl he saved was no ordinary child. She was the key to something far beyond this planet, and the stars themselves were about to remember her name. The night was quiet inside the small cabin, but outside, the wind screamed like angry ghosts. Eli Carter closed the metal door behind him and pressed a switch to lock it. The thick steel panels sealed with a hiss. He stood there for a moment, listening to his own heartbeat. He could still hear the faint echo of drones somewhere in the distance, searching the desert. He looked down at the girl lying on his bed. Her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. The heater hummed softly, filling the cold air with a weak warmth. Eli pulled off his gloves and sat beside her. The jacket he had wrapped around her looked huge on her small frame. Her silver hair fell across her face like threads of light. He filled a small metal cup with water and placed it near her lips. "Come on, kid," he said softly. "You need to drink." The girl didn't move. Eli gently lifted her head and let a few drops of water touch her mouth. Her throat moved weakly as she swallowed. For the first time, he noticed the faint blue glow under her skin again. It pulsed slowly, matching her heartbeat. He frowned. "What in the stars are you?" he whispered. His wrist scanner, still cracked from the storm, suddenly lit up again. Unregistered energy signature detected. The screen flashed rapidly, showing strange patterns as if something invisible filled the room. Eli turned toward the girl. The glow around her body grew brighter. Then, without warning, she gasped and sat up. Her eyes were wide open, silver and bright like two moons. For a second, Eli froze in shock. Hey, easy," he said quickly, raising his hands. "You're safe. No one's gonna hurt you." The girl looked around the cabin, confused. Her gaze moved over the old metal walls, the flickering heater, the pile of scavenged tools. Finally, her eyes stopped on Eli. "You brought me here," she said in a weak, broken voice. Eli nodded slowly. "Yeah, you were buried under a wreck. Lucky I found you before the scav bots did." She blinked, then looked down at the jacket she wore. "You covered me." "It's just a jacket," Eli said, trying to sound casual. "You were freezing." Her expression changed, something between sadness and disbelief. "No one ever covered me before." Eli felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He had no answer to that. He turned away, pretending to check his tools. "What's your name?" The girl looked unsure. She hesitated for a long moment, then whispered, "Lyra." "All right, Lyra," he said. "I'm Eli." When he turned back, she was staring at his wrist scanner. "You have one too," she said softly. "Just like them." "Like who?" he asked, her face turned pale. "The hunters. The ones who put me in the cage." Eli froze. "Cage?" She nodded, tears forming in her silver eyes. "They made us fight." "For energy. When I refused, they left me to die in the wreck." Eli clenched his fists. He had seen many kinds of cruelty in this galaxy, but this was beyond belief. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "No one's going to find you here." But before he could finish, the cabin lights flickered. The heater went dark. Every device shut down at once. The silence was complete. Eli grabbed his flashlight and looked around. His scanner glowed red again. System warning. External interference detected. Lyra's body began to glow brighter, filling the small room with blue light. The symbols on her skin started moving, shifting like living lines. She closed her eyes, trembling. "They're close," she whispered. "They're tracking me." Eli ran to the control panel and activated his jammer. The air vibrated with static noise as invisible waves spread from the cabin. "That'll buy us time," he muttered. Lyra's breathing was fast now. "They won't stop." "He wants me back." "Who?" Eli demanded, her voice cracked. "Zareth, the one who owns the stars." Eli's blood ran cold. He had heard that name before, in war stories, in black market whispers. Zareth, the warlord who destroyed worlds and enslaved whole colonies. If that monster was hunting this child, then Eli had just made himself a target too. He grabbed a rifle from the wall and checked the energy cell. "You're not going anywhere near him again," he said firmly. Lyra looked at him with fear and confusion. "Why are you helping me?" "You don't even know who I am." Eli glanced at her, his expression hard but kind. "Because someone should have helped me when I needed it. Nobody did. I'm not making that mistake again." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside howled, shaking the metal walls. Then Lyra whispered, "Eli." He turned, her eyes glowed brighter, and her voice sounded different now, calm, almost otherworldly. "They're here." Eli's scanner beeped wildly. On the screen, several red dots appeared around the cabin, closing in fast. He switched off the lights and grabbed his gun.
"Stay behind me," he said quietly.
The sound of mechanical feet echoed outside. Shadows moved across the window, tall armored figures scanning the ground. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "If they find me, they'll kill you too." Eli looked down at her and whispered, "Then let's make sure they don't." As the first shadow touched the door, he took a deep breath, ready to face whatever was coming. The soft blue light from Lyra's skin illuminated his face. The human and the alien girl, two broken lives, stood together in the dark, unaware that the storm outside was only the beginning. The first sound was a slow, heavy thump against the metal door, followed by another, and another. Each hit shook the small cabin like an earthquake. Dust fell from the ceiling. Eli Carter gripped his rifle tightly, his pulse racing in his ears. The girl, Lyra, crouched near the heater, glowing faintly in the dark. Outside, the wind screamed as if the desert itself was alive. The faint sound of mechanical feet echoed through the storm, slow, careful, searching. Eli switched his scanner to silent mode and watched the small red dots moving on the screen. There were 5 of them. One stopped near the window. Another climbed onto the roof. The others circled the area like predators hunting in the dark. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "They can smell my energy. They always find me." Eli's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Then we better make it hard for them this time." He moved quickly to the control panel on the wall. The cabin's power grid was still weak after the last surge, but he had one thing left: a short-range electromagnetic pulse charge. He had used it before to disable drones while scavenging. It wouldn't kill the machines, but it might blind them for a few seconds. He set the timer for 20 seconds. The countdown began. Lyra crawled closer to him, fear in her glowing eyes. "They won't stop," she said. "Zareth's hunters never stop." Eli glanced at her. "Zareth, you said he owns the stars. What does that mean?" She looked down. "He doesn't just rule people. He collects them. He takes the ones who can control energy, like me. He turns them into living batteries to power his ships." Eli felt cold rage rise inside him. "He uses children?" Lyra nodded slowly. "My whole colony. I was the last one left." Before Eli could speak, the door lock started to glow red. It was melting. The hunters were burning through the metal. "Get down," he shouted. The door burst open with a blast of sand and sparks. Figures stepped inside, tall, covered in dark armor, eyes glowing red behind masks. They moved like shadows, silent and precise. Eli hit the switch. The EMP exploded with a loud hum. Blue light flashed through the room. The hunters stopped mid-step, their armor flickering. Sparks flew from their helmets. "Now!" Eli grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the back hatch. They ran through the narrow passage, their footsteps echoing against metal. The small escape door at the back opened into a tunnel leading into the desert's deep canyons. Eli had built it years ago as a secret exit. He never thought he'd use it like this. Behind them, the hunters recovered faster than expected. Their red lights turned back on, scanning the cabin, then locking onto the tunnel. One of them raised a weapon, firing a pulse shot that burned through the metal walls. Eli and Lyra ducked as the shot missed them by inches. The heat from the blast brushed past Eli's cheek, leaving a mark. He didn't stop. He pushed her forward. "Keep running," he yelled. The tunnel opened into a narrow canyon filled with rocks and mist. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone and dust. Eli jumped onto a small hover sled parked there. He started the engine. It sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. "Hold on tight." Lyra grabbed his waist and they shot forward into the darkness. The hunters followed, using their jet thrusters to glide above the sand. Red lights flashed behind them, closing the distance. Eli swerved between rocks, dodging laser fire. Each shot exploded sand into the air. He gritted his teeth. "They're faster than I thought." Lyra leaned close to his ear, her voice shaking. "If I touch the sled, I can boost it." "What do you mean?" "I can make it move faster. But it will hurt me." Eli looked at her for a split second, then said, "No, you already suffered enough." "We'll make it," but Lyra didn't listen. Her hands began to glow bright blue, and the hover sled suddenly surged forward like a lightning bolt. The ground blurred beneath them. The hunters fell behind, their scanners losing track in the speed haze. The sled raced out of the canyon and into an open wasteland filled with wrecks of old ships. Pieces of forgotten war machines lay half buried in the sand. When they finally stopped, Eli's hands were shaking. He turned to Lyra. Her skin was pale and her glow had dimmed. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice full of worry. She smiled weakly. "We're alive, aren't we?" He sighed and nodded. "Yeah, for now." He helped her off the sled and led her toward a broken starship half buried in the sand. The hull still looked strong enough to hide in. As they entered the wreck, the air inside felt strangely warm, like something was still alive in the old metal. Eli placed his scanner on a wall. It started to react, showing strange readings. "This place? It's from before the wars," he murmured. "Old human tech mixed with alien parts." Lyra touched the wall and the whole wreck hummed softly. Faint blue lights traveled across the corridors like veins waking from a long sleep. Eli's eyes widened. "What did you just do?" The ship's old AI system flickered on, its robotic voice breaking through the silence. "Welcome back, Commander's heir." Lyra froze. Her eyes widened in shock. "No, that's not possible." Eli turned to her. "Commander's heir? What are they talking about?" She stepped back, trembling. "The ship, it belonged to my mother." Eli stared at her, realization slowly hitting him. The small, scared alien girl he had rescued was no ordinary child. Outside, the desert winds howled again, but somewhere beyond the storm, a deeper danger was awakening. The hunters were regrouping, and soon Zareth himself would know exactly where to find them. The desert stretched endlessly, glowing under a pale blue dawn. Broken ships from forgotten wars lay scattered across the sands like giant bones. This place was known as the Dead Zone, a graveyard of machines and souls. No one came here, not even scavengers. The radiation storms alone could kill in hours, but Eli Carter had no choice. He walked carefully beside a hover sled, guiding it through narrow paths between twisted hulls and shattered towers. The small alien girl, Lyra, slept on the sled, wrapped in his thick jacket. Her breathing was slow but steady. Every time Eli looked at her, he saw the faint glow of symbols moving under her skin, like living stars flowing through her veins. He remembered the ship's words from last night. "Welcome back, Commander's heir." The voice still echoed in his mind. He didn't understand what it meant, but he knew one thing: she was important. Important enough that monsters were hunting her across worlds. Eli adjusted his mask against the wind. His wrist scanner beeped weakly, warning him about radiation spikes. "Yeah, I know," he muttered. "But we're not stopping." For hours, he pushed forward through the foggy wasteland. The air shimmered with static energy. Sometimes he thought he saw movement among the wrecks, a shadow crawling across metal, a pair of glowing eyes watching. But when he turned, there was nothing. He stopped beside the remains of a massive ship half buried in the sand. Its human design was old, maybe 2 centuries before his time. "Looks like a Titan-class carrier," he whispered. "Could be shelter." He lifted Lyra gently off the sled and carried her inside through a cracked airlock. The ship's interior was dark and silent, but the walls still hummed faintly with power. The moment they stepped in, her markings glowed brighter. Eli looked down at her uneasy. "Every time you light up, something weird happens." Lyra's eyes opened slowly. "This place? I know it. You've been here before?" She nodded weakly. "My mother used to bring me here when I was small. She said the old humans built these ships to fight for freedom." Eli frowned. "Humans fought your people?" "No," Lyra said softly. "They fought for us. My people didn't have weapons then. They only had songs." Her words struck him strangely. "Songs?" She smiled faintly. "Our power comes from sound. We can turn emotion into energy. That's why Zareth hunted us. He couldn't create it, so he took it from others." Eli stared at her, realizing she wasn't just special. She was from a race that could create living energy through feeling, something machines or warlords could never control. He helped her sit on a broken console while he checked the systems. Most of the ship was dead, but one section still had power. He linked his scanner and started running diagnostics. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. Blue lines spread across the walls like veins coming alive. Then the ship's main terminal flickered on. The same cold metallic voice echoed again. Identity confirmed. Genetic key match, heir of Commander Lysera. Eli turned to Lyra. "Commander Lysera, that's your mother." Tears filled her eyes. "She died when Zareth invaded our home. She destroyed our fleet so he couldn't take it." The ship's AI spoke again. Message stored for successor. Do you wish to play it? Lyra's voice broke. Yes, a soft light projected from the console. A tall alien woman appeared in holographic form, her features elegant and strong. Her voice was calm, warm, full of sorrow. My daughter, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. Our home is gone. But remember what I told you. The stars remember kindness more than power. Do not let Zareth take that from you. Eli stood frozen. The message faded and silence returned. Lyra's tears sparkled in the glow of the console. Eli walked closer and put a hand on her shoulder. Your mother was brave. Lyra looked at him. She believed humans could help. She said one day a human would find me. Eli's chest tightened. He had no answer. He wasn't a soldier or a hero. He was just a scavenger who stumbled into something far bigger than himself. Before he could speak, his scanner beeped again. Faint signals approaching. Red dots, multiple. Damn it, he muttered. They found us again. Lyra stood, her glow brightening. I can feel them too. They're close. Eli looked around the dark ship, thinking fast. We can't fight them head on. Maybe the ship still has engines. He sprinted to the control pit, connecting his scanner to the ancient system. Come on, come on. The lights flickered. The floor vibrated slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then, the engines roared, old but alive. Lyra's markings flared like fire, feeding energy into the system. The ship lifted slightly, hovering a few feet off the ground. The entire desert shook under its power. Eli shouted over the noise, How are you doing that? Lyra closed her eyes. It remembers me. Outside, black ships appeared on the horizon, Zareth's hunters, spreading across the sands like vultures. Eli gritted his teeth. Then let's give them something to remember too. The engines screamed. The ancient warship rose higher, sand swirling into a storm beneath it. The hunters opened fire, but their beams bounced off the ship's shields. Inside, Lyra stood tall beside Eli, glowing like a star reborn. For the first time since her escape, she didn't look afraid. Eli looked at her, both terrified and amazed. You really are rewriting the stars, kid. She smiled faintly. Not without you, human. The ship turned toward the rising sun, its engines blazing. The chase was far from over, but for the first time they had a chance. And in the dead zone, something long forgotten, hope, had come alive again. The ancient ship floated above the desert like a ghost from another age. Its metal hull groaned as energy pulsed through forgotten circuits. Inside, the lights flickered to life, shining against walls covered with strange symbols. Eli Carter stood at the control pit staring at the readings on his wrist scanner, numbers climbing faster than he'd ever seen before. Power levels. Impossible, he whispered. Behind him, Lyra stood with her hands on the ship's console. Her glowing symbols flowed like rivers of light across her skin. The ship responded to her touch as if it had been waiting for her all this time. Eli took a careful step closer. Lyra, stop. You're draining yourself. Her eyes glowed silver. No, Eli. The ship is feeding me. It remembers me. It remembers my mother. He looked around as blue light spread through the ship's halls. Every system came alive, the shields, weapons, and long-dormant reactors. The air was thick with power. But along with the light came another sound, a deep, low hum from beyond the horizon. Eli's scanner beeped urgently. They're back. The hunters. Through the cracked viewing window, he saw black dots in the sky, ships, dozens of them, flying in tight formation. Zareth's drones were returning, larger and faster than before. Eli ran to the control seat. Can this ship fly? Lyra nodded weakly. Yes, but it needs direction. It listens to those who carry the blood code. Then tell it to listen to me, he said, gripping the controls. She smiled faintly. It already does. You saved me, Eli. The ship knows your heart. He didn't understand, but there was no time. The hunters fired first. Red beams cut through the air, striking the ground around the ship. Explosions shook the desert. The ship's shields flared to life, glowing bright blue as they absorbed the energy. Hold on, Eli shouted, slamming the ignition controls. The engines roared. Dust and lightning burst from beneath the ship as it rose higher into the sky. The wrecks of other ships were blown away like leaves in a storm. Lyra gripped the edge of the console, her small body trembling under the force. Eli struggled to keep the ship steady. She's fighting me. She's testing you, Lyra said, her voice calm even in chaos. Prove to her you're not afraid, Eli gritted his teeth. I've been afraid my whole life, kid. It never stopped me before. With that, he pushed the throttle forward. The ship surged upward, breaking through the storm clouds. Lightning danced across the hull as the old warship returned to the skies after centuries of silence. The hunters followed, firing beam after beam. The ship's shields held, but cracks began to form. One of the blasts hit near the rear engines, shaking the whole structure. Shields at 70%. Eli shouted. We can't take much more. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing. Her glow brightened until it filled the entire cockpit. I can boost it, she said softly. I can give it what it needs. Eli turned to her. No, it'll kill you, she smiled faintly. My mother said, if you can save a world by burning bright once, then burn. Before he could stop her, she placed both hands on the ship's core terminal. The blue lines around the room flared like lightning veins. The ship's power surged beyond limit. The control panel screamed with overload warnings, but Eli didn't move. Outside, the ship's weapons came alive. Massive cannons that hadn't fired in generations. Energy gathered at the tips, forming glowing spheres of light. Then in a single moment they unleashed. Beams of pure energy cut through the sky, striking the hunters one by one. The explosions painted the heavens with fire. Eli could only watch, awestruck. When it was over, the sky was silent again. The enemy fleet was gone, reduced to burning fragments falling through the clouds. Eli turned to Lyra. She had collapsed beside the console, her glow fading. He rushed to her side. Hey, stay with me, he said, lifting her gently. Her voice was weak. Did we win? He nodded. You did more than that. You saved us. She tried to smile. No, we did. The ship drifted quietly above the desert. Eli carried her to the medical pod he'd found earlier and laid her inside. The pod hummed softly, surrounding her with healing light. He sat beside her, exhausted, watching her sleep. Outside the window, the first sunrise in years touched the ship's metal surface. Eli whispered to himself, She's not a weapon. She's a miracle. But as peace settled, his scanner blinked again. One red dot still active. Not all the hunters had been destroyed, and this one wasn't like the others. The signal read, Zareth, incoming. Eli looked back at Lyra, sleeping peacefully, unaware of what was coming. He tightened his grip on his rifle and stood by the window, watching the horizon. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a scavenger anymore. He was a guardian, and if the so-called ruler of the stars wanted the girl back, he'd have to go through one very stubborn human first. The sun rose slowly over the wasteland, casting long shadows across the metal bones of forgotten ships. High above the ground, the ancient warship floated silently like a beast of legend reborn. The desert winds howled below, but inside the ship, there was only the soft hum of power. Eli Carter stood at the window, watching the horizon. His scanner blinked red again and again. A single word flashed across the screen. Zareth approaching. He clenched his fists. After all they had survived, the wreckage, the hunters, the storms, it was still not over. The real monster was coming. Behind him, the medical pod opened with a soft hiss. Lyra sat up slowly, her silver eyes adjusting to the light. Her skin still glowed faintly, but she looked stronger now. When she saw Eli, she smiled weakly. You didn't leave me. Eli turned, his tired eyes softening. Told you I don't leave people behind. She touched the pod's edge. I heard your voice while I was asleep. You were talking to the stars, he laughed quietly. Maybe I was just hoping they'd listen for once. But their quiet moment ended when the entire ship trembled. A deep rumble rolled through the air. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky. Not natural lightning, but the pulse of engines so massive that they shook the clouds apart. Eli ran to the control panel. Incoming fleet, multiple ships. He's here. Lyra stood beside him. Zareth, the air around them grew colder. On the horizon, a massive dark shape emerged from the storm. It wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress miles wide floating above the sand. Its black armor shimmered with red energy, and its cannons glowed like eyes of a sleeping god. Eli swallowed hard. That thing's a city, not a ship. Lyra's voice was quiet, filled with sorrow. He built it using our energy. The souls of my people are trapped inside it, he turned sharply. Then let's set them free. She looked at him, surprised. You can't fight him. No one ever did and lived. Eli smiled grimly. Guess it's time someone tried. The ship's systems flickered as Zareth's fleet locked on. Dozens of red targeting beams painted across the hull. Then came the first barrage, streams of plasma lighting up the sky. The ship shuddered violently. Sparks flew across the control room. Lyra gripped the console, her glow flaring brighter. "Shields at 40%. "Hold on!" Eli shouted, pulling the controls hard. The ship twisted to the side, dodging one blast and sending debris flying through the air. He hit a switch, activating the old ship's hidden cannons. The sound that followed shook the world. Twin beams of blue energy tore across the sky, smashing into one of Zareth's smaller escorts. It exploded into a cloud of fire and metal. Lyra smiled faintly. "You learn fast, human." Eli grinned despite the chaos. "Best teacher in the galaxy." But then a voice filled the ship, a deep, cold voice that seemed to echo inside their minds. "You can't hide her forever, human. Return what's mine and I'll make your death quick." Lyra froze. "That's him?" Eli stared straight ahead. "He talks too much." He grabbed his rifle and linked it with the ship's targeting system. "Let's see if gods bleed." Outside, smaller fighters swarmed like insects, firing endlessly. Eli guided the cannons, destroying one after another. But every time he hit two, three more appeared. Then the main fortress fired. A single red beam shot through the sky, so bright it blinded everything for a moment. It struck near their engines, spinning the ship out of control. "Eli!" Lyra cried. He fought the controls, sweat dripping down his face. "Come on, don't die on me now." The ship stabilized, but barely. Warnings flashed across every screen. Reactor unstable. Shields collapsing. Lyra looked at him. "If the ship falls, everything my mother protected will die with it." Eli reached out and touched her shoulder. "Then we fight, no matter what it costs." Lyra stepped forward, her glow blazing. "If I connect with the core fully, I can awaken the ship's last defense." Eli frowned. "What defense?" She looked into his eyes. "The star pulse, my mother's final weapon." He shook his head. "If you do that, it'll drain you completely." She smiled softly. "Maybe I was born for this." Before he could stop her, she placed her hands on the control sphere. The ship's core responded instantly. Blue light exploded through every hallway. The air buzzed like a storm. The old warship lifted higher, breaking through the clouds. Its entire hull glowed with ancient symbols. Zareth's fortress fired again, but this time the beam stopped halfway, absorbed by Lyra's energy. She opened her eyes, glowing like two small suns. "Now, Eli." He slammed the trigger. The ship's cannons aligned and fired all at once. Beams of blue light struck Zareth's fortress directly in the center. For a second, the sky itself seemed to split open. The explosion rolled across the desert, lighting up the world like a second sunrise. When the smoke cleared, Zareth's fortress was burning, pieces falling from the sky. Eli collapsed into his chair, gasping. Did we do it?" But Lyra was on her knees, trembling. Her light dimmed. "He's not gone. Not yet." Through the fire, a smaller black ship emerged, heading straight for them. Zareth had survived. Eli stood, his jaw tight, his hand on his rifle. "Then it's time I meet this monster myself." And as the black ship approached, the stars above seemed to tremble, because the final battle between a human and a warlord was about to begin. Smoke filled the sky like dark rivers twisting through dawn. The great fortress of Zareth burned. Above the desert, pieces of glowing metal falling like dying stars. Yet even as the world seemed to breathe again, a smaller ship broke through the clouds, a black dagger slicing the wind. Eli Carter stood in the warship's control room, staring at it. His heart pounded. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from what he knew was coming. Behind him, Lyra lay weak and pale, her glow fading to a faint shimmer. The ship hummed softly, keeping her alive with the last bits of its energy. "Stay with me, kid," Eli whispered, kneeling beside her. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You can't fight him alone." Eli smiled sadly. "I've been alone most of my life, but this time, I've got something worth fighting for." Outside, Zareth's dark ship stopped only a few meters away, hovering like a shadow ready to strike. The communication screen blinked, and then his face appeared, tall, cruel, eyes burning like embers behind black armor. His voice was deep and calm like thunder before the storm. "You're a brave little human," he said. "Bravery won't save you." Eli stood straight, his rifle hanging at his side. "Neither will fear." Zareth's smile was thin. "You think she belongs to you? She belongs to me. Her blood built my empire. Her blood built monsters," Eli said coldly. "And I don't build monsters, I bury them." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, without warning, Zareth's ship fired. A blinding red beam struck the warship's shields, throwing Eli across the floor. Sparks burst from the walls. The old vessel groaned like a dying beast. Eli forced himself up, coughing. "Lyra, you still with me?" Her eyes fluttered open. "He's too strong, Eli. He drains the light." He looked at her with fire in his eyes. "Then I'll give him darkness." He ran to the controls, activating the last of the ship's systems. The old cannons came to life one final time. The hull glowed faintly, cracked but proud. "Come on, old girl," he muttered to the ship. "Let's end this together." Zareth's ship fired again. This time Eli didn't dodge. He flew straight toward him. The two ships collided in the air, metal grinding, fire raining around them. Eli jumped from the cockpit into the open hangar of Zareth's vessel as both ships fell toward the desert. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and heat. Zareth waited, standing tall, sword made of pure energy in his hand. Eli drew his old human rifle. "Guess this is the part where you die." Zareth tilted his head. "You? A human scavenger?" Eli raised his gun. "A human who doesn't quit." The first strike was fast. Zareth's blade sliced through the air, sparks flying as it hit metal. Eli rolled aside, firing a burst of plasma. The shots hit Zareth's armor, scorching it, but not breaking through. "You are weak," Zareth growled. Eli wiped blood from his lip. "Maybe, but humans don't stop when we're weak." He fired again, aiming at the power lines on the ceiling. The shots exploded, showering the hangar in falling cables and sparks. One struck Zareth's shoulder, burning through his armor. He roared in pain, charging forward. Eli was fast, but not fast enough. Zareth's hand caught him by the neck, lifting him off the ground. "You think you can protect her?" Zareth hissed. "You can't even protect yourself." Eli struggled to breathe, his vision blurred, but through the static of his headset, he heard a soft voice, Lyra's. "Eli, the ship still listens to you. The core. Use it." Her words sparked something inside him. He reached for the small device on his wrist, the ship's command key. With his last strength, he pressed it. Outside, the warship, broken, burning, but still alive, responded. Its core glowed one last time, blue light flooding the sky. Zareth turned sharply. "What have you done?" Eli smiled through the blood. "Given her your stars." The warship's core exploded, not in destruction, but in release. Streams of light shot across the sky, spreading like wings. Every fragment of the ship turned into glowing dust wrapping around Zareth's vessel. Lyra, still inside the med pod, whispered ancient words her mother had taught her. The energy listened. The light obeyed. Zareth screamed as the energy consumed him. His armor cracked, his form burning away into pure light. His voice echoed once before fading forever. "You cannot kill me. I am the stars." Eli fell to his knees as the world went silent. The warship disintegrated into a rain of blue dust that fell softly over the desert. When he woke, the sky was clear. The black fortress was gone. Only a field of glowing sand remained. Beside him, Lyra sat quietly, her silver hair shining under the morning sun. "You did it," she said softly. He laughed weakly. "No, we did." Lyra looked at the horizon where the dust rose into the sky, forming new constellations. "The stars. They remember us." Eli looked at her, his voice warm. "They'll remember you. You're the girl who had no clothes, no hope, no limits, and still rewrote the stars. She smiled, taking his hand. And you're the human who made me believe again. They stood together as the wind carried the last of the glowing dust away. Above them, the night sky shimmered faintly, as if the universe itself bowed in quiet respect. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt alive again, healed not by power, but by compassion. Eli looked at her one last time. Where to now? Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars. Anywhere, together. And as they walked toward the sunrise, the universe itself seemed to whisper their story across time. The tale of a human who refused to bow, and an alien girl who dared to hope again.